Welcome back to Thinking Out Loud. I'm Raving David Tierney, the mouth of the Merrimack, the leather neck with the leather lungs, the man whose last name sounds like taxation without representation. That's right, Tierney. And I'm not the only one here. There's another Tierney right across from me. Michael Tierney. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Tell us a little bit about your business and what you're here for. We're talking about tattoos today, so what's your business?
Well, I'm a body art practitioner. That's what we are professionally called. I've been tattooing for 10 years. It's a very lucrative business, so it's definitely growing. Probably growing out of control.
Really?
There's actually 4 new tattoo parlors in the last 3 years in Lowell.
Really? Now, didn't Massachusetts just recently license tattooing? It wasn't always legal in Massachusetts, was it?
That's correct. It's been over 10 years.
Oh, really?
I actually started like 3 years into it when it became legal.
Okay. Our other guest here on the other side, sitting beside Michael, is Joe Raulinaites from the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, in the Worcester office. He's their public relations representative. Welcome back, Joe.
Good morning, David. I'm surrounded by Tierneys here.
Yeah, right.
A lot of Tierneys. And it's great to be here. I mean, I couldn't find a better place for this early in the morning than to be on the radio station with you.
Warm and cozy underground here.
Like you wouldn't believe.
I know. Well, in going through this interview that we're going to conduct here in a little while, I want to get some background, and I really want to have Michael Tierney educate us and inform us about the industry, about some of the ins and outs, and then we're going to have Joe's going to interact with Michael and ask him a few questions as he goes along. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours. We're on the air, live, Thinking Out Loud, which is Thinking Out Loud for television also, we should say.
All right, well, first, I mean, tattoos are a form of expression. They've been around for hundreds of years. Back in the 50s and the 60s, it was really popular in the Army, the military, the Navy. I think it might have been legal once earlier in the 70s. I'm not 100% sure about that. Then it became legal throughout. But
let me ask you this question. You say it was at one time it was legal, then apparently it fell into being illegal. Was that because there were some problems with the industry or with tattooing that they suspended it or something? Is that what happened?
I'm not 100% sure about that.
Okay.
In fact, when it became legal in Massachusetts, the legislation, the person who was fighting for it was a civil rights thing, the freedom of expression. There was really no reason for it to be prohibited. So they won that in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm. Now, Michael, you've been in a business as a sole proprietor now for 10 years, and how did you acquire the skills that you're exercising today in the practice of tattooing?
Well, I've always been interested in art, so I just have a natural artistic ability. And then when I got my first tattoo, when it became legal, and I was younger at the time, I was very interested in it. I wanted to be cool and get a tattoo. So I went in, and the whole procedure just seemed, they went through it pretty quickly. They charge good money for it. So I was like, I'm kind of interested in this. I think I could sell my artwork and make some good money. I always wanted to be like an illustrator or a comic book artist, but I never knew how to sell my art that way. It wasn't a big business, like it used to be. So, this would be a good niche for me to sell my artwork and put it on people's skin.
Let's stop you right there and say, can you tell us exactly the procedure you go through? In other words, you actually do the graphic, the artwork in advance, and get the approval of the client before you go ahead with the work. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
And how does that generally go off? Are they pretty good in terms of specifying what they want, or did they allow you a lot of exercise of your imagination and suggestions, whatever they might be?
Well, they give you free range sometimes. Normally, if someone seeks you out, it's because they like your art style particularly, so they kind of want you to give them something that's unique. And other times, you'll get people who have an exact, precise thing that they want, and you have to kind of work with their interpretation of what they want. You'll make a couple of drafts and show it to them, and then when they give you the approval, you put it on their skin.
So this involves a lot of your time, doesn't it? Even before you actually get to doing the real work. Now, You said it's a lucrative business. There's got to be a charge for this. Isn't there doing some of the? I mean, how many drafts of a design will you do before you say, okay, hey, that's enough, or you start charging more? How does that work?
Well, sometimes you scrap a whole idea. Someone will give you an idea, and they might even put down a retainer to have the artwork started. And halfway through the artwork, they change their mind, and you have to scrap the whole idea. But you have to work with people. It's going to be on them for the rest of their lives. You don't want to pressure them into something that they're not really feeling.
Now, Michael, you've chosen to be a one-man operation from the get-go. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why you've done that and the pros and cons of that?
I never really liked working for people. I kind of like to have a sense of freedom, be in control of everything. I feel like if I'm in control of my work, then there's no limit. I can't get capped. You know, I can keep moving up in the company because I am the company. But I do work well with others. I have a lot of colleagues and friends that are in the industry that we work well together.
Now, you've done some pretty famous people. Want to tell us a little bit about some?
I suppose. I mean,
a little bit of their background.
I've tattooed a couple of professional athletes. I did a Celtics player, former Celtics player. I've done a lot of like professional martial artists. So I don't know.
And when people come to you and they want to be they want to have their body adorned with some graphic art that you provide, what is their motivation? Sometimes did they get into that at all, or it's just a whim, or what is that?
A lot of people want something that has a lot of meaning.
Correct.
You know, unfortunately, you do a lot of memorial tattoos. When people do a lot for their kids, or any like stories throughout their lives, experiences that they've been through, or artwork that represents attributes about themselves, so they can just express themselves. Those are the most common type of tattoos that we really do.
If I were to get, I don't have any tattoos, but if I were to get any tattoos, which Joe Raulinaites has been encouraging me to do, I'd have an eagle, globe, and anchor on one shoulder, and I'd have a lion set on another shoulder. There's a black actor who's in one of the CSI programs or something that has a lion set on his shoulder that I absolutely envy. I love that. Joe, tell us a little bit, or give us a little perspective from the FDA. What's your concern about this, or what's your role in it?
David, I'm sure young Mike Tierney will give you a special rate on an eagle, globe, and anchor. That's really you. You know him. I'm glad that a real young guy like Mike Tierney can do so well and get into an industry and an art form that he really loves. That's a great thing. And he probably knows a lot of this stuff. The FDA regulates the devices that Mike uses. In other words, we okay them to be used in the process he uses them for. And we also regulate the removal of tattoos. They're not really always permanent, as you know. You can go through a laser procedure and get most of tattoo off. There's also a surgery option. There's a dermatological sanding option. Those are a little tough, a little expensive, and sometimes painful, and not always guaranteed. A question for Mike, which intrigues me, is we're looking closely at the pigmentation in the inks that you guys use. We regulate tattoo ink as a cosmetic, so we do have some impact in that. We don't regulate, of course, we don't regulate your industry. That's the state, and that's the Board of Health that does that locally. But the FDA, handles the devices and the removal procedure. We're seeing a lot more different shades of ink, like different pigmentations. I guess there are like 15 known shades. How do you change shading? How does that happen?
It's very similar to painting. I mean, you use your color wheel. You need black, white, and your primary colors. If you really only had 3 pigments, if you only had the 3 primary colors, you could still make all of them. So what they're essentially doing is, they're just taking the basic inks that already exist, and they're just mixing them up and making different colors out of them.
So different shades, in other words, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A hard process, or take some time?
Well, sort of, because some of the pigments have different compounds in them. Like black ink is pretty basic. It's just like carbon. It's basically made up mostly of like burnt up organic matter. And some of the color pigments actually have minerals, like metals in them, which some of them have been known to like have allergic reactions to the metals, but it'd be just like someone wearing some some fake jewelry and having a little irritation to the metal that's in the pigment. But most pigments are pretty natural. Everything that's found in them is usually found like naturally in your bodies.
Mike, this raises an interesting question. You mentioned a reaction to things. Do you have to do any sort of a medical history or background check on people when they come to you for artwork?
Well, yeah, you should be a little diligent, and you have a questionnaire when they fill out their consent forms. There's an allocated space for that where they would write down if they have a history of any diseases or allergies. It's always good to interview the client first, just to be careful. You can do a spot test if somebody's afraid, if they have allergies to a lot of things and they're hypoallergenic. You can do a spot test, which is basically you'll pick the pigment that they are afraid that might have a reaction, and you just tattoo a little dot on them in like an inconspicuous place. You give them about 48 hours, 72 hours to check up on it, see how they react to it. I've done that before.
Really?
Because I did have a client who was just super allergic to a lot of different things, and she was very nervous about that, and I insisted it was safe just to take a precaution. She had approval from her doctor. We just did a little spot test, and she was fine. The pigment was fine. It didn't cause any problems.
That raises an interesting question. Obviously, there'd be a medical condition like psoriasis or poison ivy, which would seem to, by their nature, exclude the possibility of tattooing or body art. Is that true? And what are some of the other conditions besides? I mean, I picked those two because they're probably very obvious. And
they've got you got eczema, psoriasis. You have like basal cell carcinoma, like different stuff like cancers. If you have skin conditions or disorders, you probably want to stay away from getting a tattoo, or you don't want to put the tattoo on the affected area. So if you see a present skin condition on a client, you really should advise them to see a dermatologist and get a note from them, before we just jump into the skin.
now, what if, for example, someone came to you in the summertime and they had a sunburn or something? Would you advise them to wait till the sunburn wears off before you start work on them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Here's a question for Mike. The sports figures you mentioned, I don't know, probably not a privacy issue, but what do they favor? What type of images does a basketball player or a mixed martial artist favor?
Well, they're just regular guys like me, so the same stuff. I mean, they get their kids' names on them, or just cool designs. They like, all the trending things, flames and skulls and all that cool stuff.
Okay.
Now, what happens if they get something that's popular right now, but a few years from now, maybe that's not as popular, and they want to change it? Can they do that, and how do they do that? How do you go about that?
That's actually what people come to me for mostly. I do a lot of cover-up and restoration work. Sometimes I'm surprised. A lot of people who are very successful and they make a lot of money, they have kind of terrible tattoos, and, maybe from when they were younger. Before there was a lot of regulation, people had to kind of tattoo on the street, so there wasn't a lot of like professionals that were trained. So you have a mix-up of like good artists and what we call scratchers.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of that, I know a lot of people who have served time in a penal institution end up getting tattooed while they're there. What sort of implements are they using, and how dangerous is that?
Like in prison?
Yeah, right, exactly. What are they? They're obviously they're not qualified.
They're probably not licensed either. Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the best tattoo artists around, Carl Grace. He was actually, I think he might have been in prison. Now he's like world renowned, famous. Some of the best tattoo artists actually came from there. There's a big history of it in there. I mean, you have to. Man discovered fire, so you put a guy in a cage and give him time and he'll think of a way to make it work. But there's a big safety concern about that. They don't have everything readily available like gloves and alcohol and stuff like that, but they find a way. So it's just like the street. I mean, you can buy all the personal protective equipment and all the right equipment and open a professional establishment, or you could just run around tattooing on the street, and it's the same. Like in prison, it's kind of the same, But I would never get any work done in prison. I would be afraid the work would be terrible, and there'd be a higher risk of infections.
Mm-hmm.
But they got to pass the time somehow.
Now, if someone were to walk into your shop and they were checking out different body art shops, are there a set of credentials that you can say, here are my certifications, or here's my diploma, or how do you qualify yourself to a prospect coming into you?
Well, my qualifications, I just go through the state mandated things, what they want us to do. I also have a couple of art awards, and my education from school. I have that kind of posted. Someone comes in, if someone wanted to work with me, I look for their resume. I look at if they have any past experience in art, or even in the medical field. Like maybe they were a nurse for a couple years, so they're kind of trained on aseptic technique and cross-contamination. Those are good things to have. So I look for stuff like that. Any kind of like basic medical training that they have, or any basic art training. You got to combine the two of those things.
Let's talk a little bit about regulation. You're licensed by the state, the city, and there's a national
City.
certification by the city.
Yeah.
Would it make it easier for the industry if you were state licensed across the board?
I think so. I think it's time for a big change. Each town kind of governs it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, and if you have to move, if you have to relocate for whatever reason, you have to go through the process again, pay the permit fees again. If you lose any documentation down the pipeline, you can be denied a permit, even if you've been tattooing for 5 years and you don't have your paperwork to roll over to the next governing town. They can deny you a permit.
I have a reason for asking that. I'm a massage therapist, and at one time, you had to be licensed by every individual town that you practice in, and every individual town has slightly different wrinkles and requirements that they wanted for you. And then about 6 years ago, they went with state licensing for massage therapists. That made it a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah, that would be a great thing if they could do with the tattoo industry. It would weed out a lot of the, crap.
Yeah.
And
Amateurs.
yeah, the state has model regulations that every town's supposed to follow, and I think they just need to implement that. Maybe make a few changes to the model regulations that are more current, and then probably have like a test at the end to make sure that all the prerequisites that you're supposed to take, like skin anatomy, bloodborne pathogen, CPR, those are documents that you have to go out and get on your own and submit for your license. And I think upon getting the license, you should have to take like a quiz to just show them that you didn't just bullshit those classes or print or forge a paper. Like, you should go in there and prove the material that you know.
Joe, does the FDA get involved with the chemistry or the inks or that are used by body art?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we do. The inks are, as I said, I think earlier, they're regulated as cosmetics, and of course the devices are all medical devices, and we regulate those to approve them, as I'm sure Mike knows that. Here's a question. Along your lines, Dave, when something happens, an adverse reaction, to an ink, maybe contaminated ink, whatever the case might be, or a device doesn't work, do you ever have to call in like a mid-wash report? Are you somewhat familiar with reporting those up the chain?
Well, we do have a thing called an incident report and an exposure report. We also have an exposure control plan. But these basically is if there is a problem, if the client reports a problem, whether it be present when we're doing the procedure or after the fact, we're supposed to document it and forward it to the health department. Or if I accidentally expose myself, say I stabbed myself with the needle that I was just using on a client, I have to write that down too. And I usually, a couple times in my life that's happened, and you got to go to the doctor and get blood work and just make sure you're in the clear. Accidental exposures happen all the time. Of course, since I own my own company, I can't sue myself. So.
Yeah, it sounds like some pretty honest self-reporting and making sure you do the right things when you have to. How about people that have tattoo regrets? I mean, of course, there's that expensive laser removal. Do you talk to the folks beforehand and really ask them if this is what they want on their body for the rest of their life? Do you really discuss that?
Yeah, I try to talk people out of stuff. It depends. If they really have their mind set on it. If I think it's a bad decision, like for instance, one girl wanted like a boyfriend's name, and I took her to the side and I let her know. I said, listen, I don't think it's a good idea, but
What could go wrong there?
well, I let her know. I'm a cover-up specialist, so I'll design this for you in such a way that if you need to come back in a week or a day or a month or a year, we'll erase it for you.
That's good customer service. It really is. Yeah, and Michael's right. Tattooing's been around for a long time, and of course, the FDA has only been around since 1906. And we have been pretty light on our regulatory activities, guys, only because there just haven't been a lot of adverse events with the inks or that have been reported to us. So tattooing goes on as it has for decades and decades, and it's an intriguing thing. Do you ever do any cosmetic tattooing, makeup on eyes and such?
I've done a couple of beauty marks, like just a little freckle here and there. Cosmetic tattooing, they use different machines. There's a lot of different types of machines that are available, but the ones that I typically use are a little different. Some of the pigments are different, and I think you need a special permit for that. So I stay clear of that. I feel like that's more of a risk for malpractice. I wouldn't want to poke out someone's eye doing my eyeliner. So I stay away from the cosmetic stuff. I just give referrals. I have a couple of colleagues that do that.
Is there a most popular tattoo image that withstands the test of time, that's been around since day one that you know of?
Tribal.
Mom.
Tribal. And that too. If you don't want to get in trouble for getting a tattoo, then you have to get your mom's name.
But tribal is an old standby.
Yeah.
Always there, never go away, always part of the thing.
Now, I heard a story, and maybe both of you can comment on this, that in Japan, a lot of the Japanese mafia are very heavily tattooed to the extent that it blocks up or clogs or annihilates their sweat glands, and then they have a problem keeping perspiration going in the body. Can either of you comment on that?
I think that might have something to do with the body chemistry of just the origins of where they're from. I don't know. I mean, I don't know of that happening to other people who are heavily tattooed.
Okay.
Yeah, honestly, Dave, I don't know. I don't know. I know sometimes it's rite of passage for some tattoos, and that might be part and parcel to the question. Any areas that you won't tattoo, or any tattoos that you won't do?
Yeah, I mean, I try to stay away from hands and necks.
Really?
I'll do it, but if you interview the person, see what their life goals are, what their ambitions are, what their job is. Because tattoo, it's not frowned upon. Society's warming up to it, but if you open your own company and you're going door to door selling a service to an old lady at the end of the street, you don't want to scare her off, and you got to look professional. So try to keep them off the hands and the neck, and genitals. Yeah, you stay away from that. That's just looking for trouble there. So you stay off of that, and that's about it. The whole rest of the body is free game.
How about age groups?
Age groups. Well,
How young?
I've tattooed someone. Well, 18 is the legal age in the state. Other states have different requirements on that. So I've tattooed in other states. So the youngest I might have gone was like 16 or 17, and they want you to be at the consenting age. And the oldest I've probably done was a guy who was like 80 something.
Wow. Did that present some unusual problems because of his age and the condition of his skin or dermis?
Well, he was asking me about the aftercare, and I told him to be really diligent, especially with his age and his immune system. I don't know how well he'll recover from it. And he started asking me questions about he was going on vacation and he was going to go swimming, and was it okay to go in a pool? And I'm like, well, given the nature of the situation and how old you are, I think you should do whatever you want, because it might be the last time you ever go to a pool. No, I was just joking with him. He I guess wouldn't be a midlife crisis, but you know, he was covered in tattoos. So,
Really?
yeah.
Okay. I noticed that in recent years, tattooing body art has become a lot more popular with women.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, I noticed there's one woman, one young woman I saw the other day. I didn't know whether she was wearing, if that was her stockings, and I found out it wasn't. It was her skin. It was a tattoo. It was so beautifully decorated. And I've seen some that are very beautiful.
Yeah, there's a lot of good artwork out there. You know, I just there's some people who just want a tattoo so bad they'll get one from anyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, gentlemen, it's been great having you on. You've been on Thinking Out Loud for radio, and Thinking Out Loud also for television. Appreciate your coming in and sharing your wisdom with us. Michael, thank you very much. We appreciate your
Pleasure.
coming in. And Joe, it's always a pleasure having you, my man.
Thank you, David.
All righty. Well, we'll continue with the program, but right now, this is a little bit of Bone Money from Galactica.